Hey everybody, I'm Barney Taylor. Welcome back to In the Record Room, the YouTube show that is all things vinyl and all things soul. And listen, this is really exciting. Look who's here today with me. Jordan Wilson, DJ, collector and promoter. Jordan, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great. This is a great opportunity for me. So thank you very much, Barney.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, I have set you the task. I said everybody, the top 3 challenge, I'm calling it, where you have to choose 3 records or artifacts which speak to your relationship with soul music. We've got loads to talk about, and I'm going to begin where I always begin, Jordan. Where did your love of soul music start?
Do you know what? This is a question that it's a long-winded question. I'm going to put it out there now. I'm going to take you back to my childhood as a young kid. So my mum and dad, they had previous marriages before getting together and having me. So when they did get together and have me, I was like basically an only child. And to say I was eccentric is putting it. I was an eccentric kid, and being a young age, I had friends who lived across the road from me in Wigan, and they were older than me, but their parents were quite eccentric as well. So they were into like punk. They were into like the Ramones, Stiff Little Fingers, the Sex Pistols, all sorts of music like that. Yeah. And I looked up to these lads, a brother and a sister and another group of guys. And I just thought they were amazing. This music that I was hearing other stuff like 60s music, like the Kinks and stuff as well. And I think that is a starting point for me, because I started listening to their taste in music and getting influence kind of from their parents as well. And it set me off on a path really of listening to alternative music to other than what was in the chart. So I was like 10 years old then, and I was listening to this strange music and kind of getting a bit into politics of the time as well as like the punk era was happening. Of, you know, it was crazy. It's weird thinking back, like kind of what I was listening to, but I just looked up to these guys that were playing this music, and I was blown away. I remember having sleepovers and listening to the Kinks. Is it Misty Water? Mm-hmm. and having these like this picture in my head of kind of listening to the lyrics and then visualizing what they was talking about. And it was just from that moment on, I've never like listened to chart music or anything like that. And as I got older, I moved away from that. That was in Swinley in Wigan, and I moved probably about 5-6 miles away, which is, it seems like 300 miles away when you're that age. And, and I was away from that group of people, and then I started going to high school. But when I was in high school, when I was like, say, when I was like 14, 15 years old, I was obsessed with Wigan's musical past history. Yeah. So like even George Formby, performing at Wigan. And then I got to know when the Grand Arcade Shopping Centre was being built in Wigan. I remember walking through with my dad, and they opened this cafe called the Casino Cafe. Right. And I was just like, they had all these bits of memorabilia in the big black and white photos done by Frank Orrell, who was a photographer. And I remember saying to my dad, Casino Cafe, Station Road, all these things were going round in my head. And I was a young lad, and my dad said, oh, well, that's all to do with Northern Soul. Like Wigan was, one of the hearts of Northern Soul. Now, my mum and dad, my mum's from Liverpool. My dad is from a place called Billinge, which is in between Wigan and Liverpool. And my dad knew of soul music and Northern Soul through going to like youth clubs and things, but he didn't have a knowledge of it. He never collected. He never went to Wigan Casino or anything like that. But I remember my dad telling me about it, and that just, it set me off really. I was intrigued by it. And then then I found the footage on YouTube that was done by Tony Palmer, the This England footage.
Yeah.
And it was just seeing kids who was like 15, 16, 17-year-olds at that time in the 1970s,
Yeah.
expressing themselves in the way that they was through dance, and
Yeah.
you know, dancing in a way that they was, you know, doing every move to the lyric of that song.
Yeah.
And it was just like, wow, what is this? And I just found myself researching. I was lucky because I had the internet, you know.
Yeah.
I was researching and just delving more and more into this music. And I started off the way everybody does, you know. You start off with the real commercial soul stuff, and I had nobody to guide me as well. I was like I say, I'm an only child basically. I've got stepbrothers and sisters, but they're a lot older than me, and we never lived together. So I had just nobody to guide me, and I was on my own and listening to all this music, and I just can't express it. It took a hold of me. It really did, in a weird way. And I think music's just always been a part of my life, and it is how I got to know about Northern Soul is mainly from being from Wigan and the history of my town, really. So that's how I got to know about the music.
It's amazing because what you're describing is cultural memory, the memory of a town. Now we see all the photos of the buildings gone now and commemorated and these kind of things. But to actually be at the source, and you are at the epicenter. I mean, as you say, it must be really fascinating because it also speaks of personal history. You must have met so many people since you've been exploring who were there or were at other places. I know you know people who've played there, you've organized events, these kind of things. We'll come back to that in a moment. But it's also interesting because you're actually talking about exploration and curiosity, which is what we do as humans, isn't it?
Yeah, I was so curious about, I just wanted to know more. It's like when you watch the This England footage of Wigan Casino, and you know, I think it's the MPVs that comes on, Turning My Heartbeat Up, and then a few first bars of that record.
Yeah.
It's just like, wow. And then you just see the slow motion videography of them dancers, and you can just see they love it. They loved it. And that is something I was searching for going through high school. My friends were into like dance music. We was going to under 18s, dance music, MCing, some real cringy stuff. And I was kind of pretending that I liked it. Yeah. And they were all so into it, but they were always like running ahead with this music and like finding so much about it. And then I was like, and I was behind them all the time. And then I kind of realized that wasn't me. It just wasn't me. And I found Northern Soul and Rare Soul, and I just thought, wow, this fucking really connects with me. It really connects with me. And then, so what I did from that, I didn't know where an event was happening. I'd never heard of Soul Source, which has an event calendar on, and I never knew that hundreds of events were happening every single Saturday evening. Well, Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. And I wanted to go to a soul event in Wigan, and I approached a few people, I think I was 14, 13, 15, and everyone was saying, no, you're too young, you can't come, because the kind of places I wanted to go to the real commercial events, because that's what I was picking up on when I was Googling Northern Soul in Wigan. I was picking up, you know, bars and stuff, and they wouldn't let me go. I didn't know about, because I still argue there is a big underground rare soul music scene, and I didn't know of them events, and everyone was telling me, you're too young, you can't come. Once you're 18, come back. But I was like, no, I'm not having that. I'm not having it at all. And a guy approached me who is a councillor in Wigan, for Wigan Council, and his name is Bob Briley, and he ran a soul event in Hindley in Wigan called the Monaco Ballrooms that happened, I think it was the last Saturday of every month. And he said, Jordan, come along. He said, you can come in for free up until you're 18, and then after 18 you can start paying to come in. He said, but come for free, you're my guest. So I went on my own. I started going on my own, and
Wow. Okay.
and I asked my dad. I said, I really want to go and see what this music's all about. And I met Bob on the door, and he brought me in, got me a drink, and sat me at this table. And I got in there early as well. And then I started seeing all these people come in, and I just sat there, and I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
And just I think it was what really grabbed me. What was the music, but it was just seeing people of all ages just expressing themselves, and that's something that I always wanted to do. I always felt like with today's generation, they're so uptight. They're so uptight, and I've always been like influenced by art and music, and I wanted to kind of be a bit free, and I think this scene kind of allowed me to be free. I was allowed to get up and dance, and nobody cared what you looked like. I could sweat. You go to a club now, you can't go on a dance floor and start sweating. You've got to smell nice, you've got to look good, you've got to wear the right clothes, because it's a scene which is, you're trying to attract girls. This scene, I was dancing with people, 40s, 50s, and I was sweating. I didn't care what. I was just so tuned into this music. So tuned into this music, and then what happened is I started to notice a few other young people there. So I started going on the last Saturday of every month. I was going to one soul event a month, and I started noticing a few people turning up at these soul events who were in their 20s, in the 30s, and one was a lad called Ben Hindley, and that is now my partner Charlotte, who I just love so much because she just allows me to do whatever I want. But that was her brother Ben, and he had a friend called Danny Payton as well, and they just took me under the wings. And Ben had a flat in Wigan, which was, he won't mind me saying this, was an absolute dive. It was a real lad's pad. And I started basically living at that flat and listening to soul music. And then I started buying records. There was a guy at the Monaco, and he used to have a record stall, and I used to buy bootleg records, and I never bought originals because nobody ever taught me to buy originals. The soul night crowd there was saying, well, it doesn't matter what you play on, and buy a bootleg. And I didn't have anybody to tell me that wasn't the right thing to do. I started buying bootlegs and getting together at the flat, and we were sharing this love for music. And then I met Ben's mum, because Ben had been brought up on soul music, and she was also going to the Monaco. Ben had problems with his friendship group, and to save him getting back into that group again, his mum was taking him out to the Monaco to kind of pull him away from that friendship group, where we connected. And Charlotte's mum and Ben introduced me to Charlotte, who I've been with for nearly 9 years now.
Wow. Okay.
And both me and Charlotte we fell in love basically around this music. And then again, I wanted more. I was starting to find out about the all-nighter scene. I wanted to, and then I found out about buying original records. I wanted to buy original first issue records because going back to my childhood, I've always collected things as well. I've gone through some real weird phases. Like I had a metal detector, for God's sake. And I used to go out on my own in fields looking for bits of shrapnel and I've always collected things. And once I start collecting things, I can't just collect a record. I have to have the first issue, the first label. And then what happened then, I started buying acetate records, studio discs, and then studio masters. So that's going off track now, really. But
not at all. What you're describing, Jordan, is just real passion, an extraordinary passion that was kind of awoken in you, and we all need something that keeps us going, don't we? We all need something that pushes us and lets us kind of push ourselves as well. I mean, the collecting thing, I fully understand. You know, the only downside with collecting rare soul is it can be quite expensive. So that's
hence why I am currently sat in my mum and dad's house in the box bedroom, because like I've got a job. I do graphic design for local government. You know, it's nothing serious, my design work, but you know, I get good DJ spots. I DJ every weekend now, but you know, I get a decent, you know, income coming in, but it's this addiction. I'm addicted to buying master tapes, acetates, vinyl, and if anybody out there is listening and buys similar things to me, you can understand how expensive this is. I've currently probably got about 50 quid. We're coming to the end of the month now, and I cannot wait to get paid because I've got about 50 quid in my bank account. But as soon as I get paid, I've got 2 tapes waiting for me from the recent Don Davis Studio Masters auction.
Wow.
And I think that's 500 quid that's going out to buy them 2 tapes, which have got some great alternative versions of records on.
Yeah. Listen, it's what we'll do is we'll come back in a moment and I'll ask you to talk about the records you've chosen. I want to understand how you went from being on the dance floor to putting records that brought other people onto the dance floor. So when did you start DJing?
So what happened was we was going locally to soul nights. We didn't really go to all-nighters at first. We was going to soul nights around Wigan and the greater Manchester area. We didn't travel much because we didn't have a car. None of us drove, so I was relying on train a lot. But it's kind of, you know, replicating the story of the guys in the 70s. Same thing happening again for us. And we was noticing, like I say, not all-nighters. This is soul nights. We was noticing that it was a very nostalgic scene with people wanting to kind of look back on the, you know, nothing wrong with that. I totally get it. But we were saying, well, we've heard this great track on YouTube, and you know, we were listening to like the Kent Ace compilations of Rare Soul, and we were saying, oh, I want to hear that. Why is no one playing it? And everyone was saying, oh, I had people say to me, well, it wasn't that's not a Wigan tune. We want up-tempo, you know, Willie Mitchell. And I said to Ben, I said, we need to do something of our own. We're together with me, Ben Hindley, and Danny Payton and Charlotte. We said, we need to do something a little bit different. You know, we knew we wasn't going to change the world, for God's sake. We had bootleg records. I'm not afraid to say that. We was playing bootleg records because, like I say, we had no guidance from anybody. We didn't know the Rare Soul scene. And we started a soul night up in Wigan called Highfield Soul Club. And I was like probably 16. And I was like, wow. And it really took off because we was playing. I was then listening to live cassette tapes of Wigan. And I was studying people like Richard Serling, Pep, Martin Ellis, Pat Brady, and people like that. And I'd sit there with headphones on listening. I got a cassette player. I had people giving me cassettes. I was listening to stuff on YouTube. And I was writing down tracks that I didn't know that was forgotten Wigan records. And I thought, well, let's start a night with kind of the ethos and the, you know, the message that we're going to play a mixture of classics and forgotten tracks. And I said, let's look back at the clubs of the 70s. I said, what we need to do in this club, we need to turn all the lights out. So we turned all the lights out in there. We got bin bags on the windows. This is in Highfield Cricket Club. We bin bagged all the windows up so it was pitch black. We got some UV lights and we got some red spots on the stage. And our first night, we packed that place out. It was 3 quid, or maybe even 2 quid, £2-3 to get in. And we had it packed out, and the people who was coming was part of this nostalgic scene. It wasn't really interested in original vinyl. And they just wanted to dance, basically. But what we also seen is we had young people from around Wigan as well that was into the alternative indie scene as well coming along, and they were just blown away. And we started playing records, and it was just like, because I've got to express to you enough that we didn't have the rare soul scene guys, these big DJs coming to this little club. It was people who just wanted to dance and you know, and kind of relive their youth. But we was then playing these forgotten records again, and it was like we was breaking these records for the first time all over again. And it was such a buzz. And then what happened was things came tumbling down because we started building, and we thought we had something special, and we didn't realize the guys that had devoted their life buying original vinyl. And we asked some, he won't mind me saying this because he knows that I've told this story to a few people before. We had Sean Chapman come, and we used to go, by this time we was going to all nighters, we was looking up to Sean DJ, and he was like breaking boundaries, playing Latin soul, some funk soul, the Night of the Wolf, Al Foster, which was like so weird from the stereotypical like classic Wigan sounds. And we had Sean come, and I was made up, 16 years old, but I was playing all bootlegs, and I was buying loads of records, probably more than Ben and Danny was buying. So they put me on before Sean Chapman was going to go on. And I got up, I played Eddie Parker, I'm Gone. I played Lou Pride, I'm Coming Home in the Morning. And I was just like, oh, this is great, this is great. And Sean came up, he said, are you playing originals? I said, no. I said, I'm a young lad, I can't afford originals. He said, well, Jordan, he said, that's not right. He says, you've asked me to come, I've traveled a long way. He says, these records I was going to play, you're playing a lot of my tunes. And it just hit me all of a sudden. And I got a bit upset about it. And I went home after that night, and I sold my whole collection. I sold everything. And I said, he's right. He said, I'm not being funny, Jordan. If you want to start doing all-nighters, if you want to start doing the more reputable soul events, you need to buy original records. And that was mainly down to some of the guys in Wigan was saying to me, you don't need original records. But they wasn't doing. Then you looked at these, nothing against these guys, but they wasn't doing the events that I wanted to do. And it just hit me. So I went home and sold everything, and I started again. I started from scratch, and I told Ben, Danny, and by this time we had another DJ, Nicole. I said, we need to start all over again. I said, let's buy original records, and everyone sold the collections. We started all over again.
That's
original vinyl.
It's an amazing story. It's really brave just to put your hands up and say, listen, because actually what you're describing is someone who has spent a lifetime collecting these records. Like we can all get a 10 quid record off of Discogs and go out and play it, and it can be the rarest record in the world. It doesn't matter because it's just a copy. But like, I mean, with everybody I know, it's so important. If you don't have it, don't play it. And it's fundamental.
That's what I didn't understand when I was young. And I say this, there's one of my best friends at the minute is a lad called Charles Simpson. And I had another friend called Owen Bolton, who's not on the scene now, but when he started, he says, I want Rita and the Tiara's Gone with the Wind. I said, just love it, and enjoy that DJ. You love playing that record, and you know, don't spoil it by getting a bootleg. You go and follow that DJ, and, you know, and love it. I said, there's so many great records that can define you as a DJ that are 10, 20 pounds. Buy them. I said, and you know what? And they got it. They really did. Some of the young lads on the scene don't get it, but you know, the majority of people do. And I think it's good now because there is a good group of young people on the scene. And when new people are coming in, they're passing this message on to them. And it's kind of, you know, but that's what we didn't have. We had nobody passing that message on. And we was quite lucky then when we first started out, because we started getting, when we started buying original records again, we was around Wigan and Greater Manchester area, we was the only young people really on the scene. Me, Ben, Danny, Ethan Howarth, you know, we was the only young people around that area. So we got helped a lot. Richard Sterling, I cannot really, I respect that man so much, because Richard, I don't know, he started really advising me well. People like Ian Wills from Wigan, old casino DJ, they passed the right message on to me, and that's what, you know, and And now there's a lot of young people coming onto the scene, and they want to be up there DJing and stuff, but it's a lot harder for them because there's quite a lot of young people wanting to do it. We was lucky really. I was lucky,
But you know, and I think it's what's interesting about your story is it is passion, which is what made you do it, and then but also there's a humility. Like everybody I know who collects, they don't give it large about their records. Most of the time you don't even know they've got them. But you know it's taken them a long time to get this particular record, and they may not even play it. I mean, we have people who come to our dues because they know a DJ's got a record. They'll travel hoping to hear it. And you've been there, I've been there. When you hear one of those really rare records, it's a real pleasure. It's like being live with people, isn't it?
That's one of the reasons we get on the train and travel to the 100 Club to hear Butch DJ. We all travel, 200, 300 miles to hear people like Butch, Kitch, Alan Kitchener, Mick H. We'll go, the length and breadth of the country just to hear them DJs play. And that is what's so exciting. And that's what keeps us, traveling to
No, I agree entirely. And also it's about respect. I mean, the people you're describing have devoted their life to collecting. And you're earlier on in that sort of length of devotion, but at the same time, it's in any community. They don't survive if you don't respect people, if you don't respect. But at the same time, you're allowed to want to innovate within tradition. You have to be able to always be looking. Maybe what we might do, and there are loads of other things I want us to talk about. I'm going to ask you, what's the first record you've chosen and then you're going to tell me the story of it, Jordan.
So I bought a few records out. So it's this track here, Road Jack Records. It's the International GTOs, and I Love My Baby.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
The story behind this, and it means so much to me, and a guy that I've not mentioned yet. I wanted to start hearing rarer soul records, so I started going to a venue in Wigan called the Oral, and it was a rare soul event, and it was run by Andy Garside, Teresa Nolan, and some other guys, and there was a DJ there called Tony Clark. And as you just said before about people being humble about collections, I cannot express to you enough how nice of a man, and I bet a lot of the people listening to this will not have heard of Tony Clark. This man has got probably one of the best record collections in the UK, but to him, they're just records. And Tony put me onto this record. I used to go to the Oral to hear stuff that I haven't heard before, but people knew me from the Highfield Soul Club, and I used to get some, stick for playing bootlegs, and I didn't understand it. And a lot of people would look at me and say, "Oh, he plays bootlegs, don't talk to him." And Tony wasn't like that. Tony came up, and I was on my own again. I used to drive my scooter up there, and Tony came and sat next to me, and he said, "Have you ever heard the International GTOs? I Love My Baby." And I said, "No, never heard of it." To many people watching this, it's a classic. I didn't know it. And he said, he said that it's, great record. And from that conversation, I started talking to Tony, and he put me onto loads of great records. And when I was a young lad, I met Tony once, and then we exchanged numbers. And we used to talk on the phone. He'd send me records to listen to, and it used to just blow me away. Real rare soul tracks. And I used to get the train on my own to Nottingham. He lives in a real little small village just outside of Nottingham in the middle of nowhere. His nearest neighbour's probably about 2 miles away, and he's got this most amazing record room. And I'd go down early Saturday morning and then stay with him and then do an all-nighter, and he would play me tracks like the International GTOs. And he is the man that got me into collecting originals, set me off in the right path. He put me onto, if he still puts me on, all these years later, 8 years or so later, I'm still going to his house, and he's putting me onto great tracks. So that is just the track of our friendship, mine and Tony Clark's friendship. That he introduced me to that track at the Oral. He approached me, and I was on my own, and then from that conversation about that record, I set out to buy an original. I think it cost me about £300, and I got it eventually. And it just means so much to me, that record, even though it is a stone cold classic. It just means a lot to me. It means a lot to me.
And it means a lot to me, genuinely, that you're telling these stories, because one of the things that I love so much about talking to people like yourself is it's all about a journey. And it's
Yeah.
about taking these steps. It sounds to me like you have met some really generous people, and you've had a kind of apprenticeship in some ways.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And then it also sounds to me like you're kind of paying it back and forward as well, and getting involved with other people. And it talks to me about community as well. And you're, as you're describing, at the epicenter of a very traditional soul community in many
Yes.
ways.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, there is enough opportunity for new people like yourself to come along once
Yeah.
you've learned your lessons and get involved.
That's
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
and
Respect, yeah.
I think that's really
Yeah.
important, because it leads me into, I was having a look round and I wanted to ask you about, maybe we're not going to be skipping too far ahead, but I wanted to ask about the Empire Soul All-Nighter
Yeah.
and what you did with that. And I want to hear all about that poster as well.
Okay. Yeah. So just going back to Highfield,
Yeah.
our first Soul Night when we was 15,
Yeah.
and then we had a few disagreements with the committee.
Okay.
The
Yep.
committee.
Yep.
Oh, a bunch of old blokes that like to bowl. They had a committee room next door, and they got just really annoyed with us because we started putting the biggest sound system in there with blacked out windows,
Yeah.
and literally the music was that loud that the glasses were rattling off the shelves. And they was just really getting on at us. And even though we were packing this place out and making them so much money with drinks over the bar, I said to Ben, I said, we're going to have to move this somewhere else. And he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to start an all-nighter. And then we started a club called the Backstreet All-Nighter in Bolton, which is now being took over by the Let's Get Together and Do It guys, Neil Higson and Jim Beetroot. I think his name is Beetroot, I don't know. But they're doing a funk thing there now. But we originally took that venue over from a friend of ours who was doing a little all-nighter there. And it is a tiny, and it is literally, you go down an alleyway, it's a residential street. And this to us was a big move because it was kind of tapping into the rare soul all-nighter scene then. So we started that, and we did 2 or 3 all-nighters there, and they went really well. But we had problems with the management there because they started to see they charged us a lot for the venue, and then we was charging like £12 to get in to cover, we was paying our DJs like £100 each to DJ. And then, we wasn't making any money, but they were seeing the money. So we had disagreements there. Then we started another all-night. So we moved it to the Old Courts, where we set up the brand name A Sentence to Soul, because it was in an old Victorian courtroom. So A Sentence to Soul. And then, so at this time, my co-promoters, Ben and Nicole were starting to settle down. They were in a relationship. They met on the scene, and they started, moved in together, and they wanted to have a child, which they've had 2 now, and they wanted to settle down a bit. And I was younger than them, and I was still raring to go. I wanted to make something happen, especially in Wigan. And this all night at the Old Courts was getting rammed. We was packing it out to max capacity. We were selling the tickets out, and I'm sure they won't mind saying this, but Ben and Nicole lost a bit of interest, really. And I approached them, and I actually got asked by the rollering venue where we set up the Empire All-Nighter. They seen what I was doing at the Old Courts and approached me and said, how about coming doing an all-nighter here? And I said to them, well, I was a student then. I was in college. I said, I can't. That was a big risk. If anybody's been to that venue, it is huge. It was in the 80s. It was the biggest rollering in Europe. So you can imagine, if you're thinking like the King's Hall, Stoke, it's probably, I'd say 3 times the size of that. It is absolutely. It is massive. You get 500 people in that venue, and it's still pretty quiet. So
okay, so that's a massive risk.
Massive risk for me. And then I was thinking, I've got to pay DJs, I've got to pay, our little sound system we was using at Highfield would not go, you know, then I had to get a proper sound engineer in to do this.
Yeah.
And then, so it was all these things bubbling away. And I went back to her and said, I can't do this myself. I said, it's too much of a risk. And they said, well, they was aware of Wigan Casino and how it used to run with Mike Walker and Russ. And Russ was employed to come into the casino, and he got paid, you know, so much, you know, for how many people they got in and blah, 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 blah. So they said, well, we'll run the event and we'll take, you know, all the money and everything, and then we'll sort all the DJs out and we'll take the risk. And you know, yeah, okay, that sounds good. So they basically, that's how it started. And I said to Ben and Nicole, I said, I'm going to start something up of my own. And we was under the name Wigan Young Souls then, which I did not create. I hated that name because we was getting people messaging us, asking us to come and dance at venues. And it was like we were some sort of mad dance group. And I hated that name. And I you know, I wanted to get away from it, really. Although I loved everybody involved in it, I just wanted to start something up in my own. So we started the Empire Soul All Nighter up, and that was me and Charlotte, you know, my life partner, my soulmate Charlotte, who I met on the scene. And we started it up, and we started our first all nighter. We got a sound engineer in, and we said we're only going to do one a year because the venue was that big. I wanted it to be max capacity. I wanted to fill it. So we took a year to promote it. And as you mentioned about the poster, for the first couple, I did the poster myself. And there was, the first few events was so successful. Like I say, I only wanted to focus. I firmly believe in not overkilling an event. I said, I only want to do one event a year. So we did it every September. And we was getting it absolutely rammed. And I want, my idea was, you know, I didn't want to step on people like Gold Soul's toes. I wanted to make something on a large scale. But I also wanted to do it where you could hear a mixed bag of music under one roof. So it was still, although we play classics, we can still be progressive. So all the DJs that I've booked, people like John Vincent, who's always been progressive since the Wigan days. He did places like Cleethorpes. He played, you know, he broke Stone Cold Classic Records, but he also chucks unissued tracks in that have that Northern Soul feel, but are of a difference. And so that's my mentality when I'm booking a DJ. I want to get the balance right, and how we plot the DJs throughout the night. I know who's going to speak good on a microphone, who's going to bring something to the table and keep it flowing throughout the night. So over the years, I can't really remember when I can't remember what the year was when we first started Empire. But we it was amazing. Brian Cannon came along, who was the Verve and Oasis photographer, and he took this amazing photo. If you search the Empire Soul All Nighter on Facebook, you'll see this photo, and you'll see how many people we get in there. You know, we had like 800 people in, and it was just a sea, and it was a mixed bag of people. Because I've always been, you know, I respect everybody, and you know, I don't get into disagreements or arguments or the politics of the scene, and I think that's a good thing, because then you get people respect you and support you. So we had all different people coming under one roof. There was no politics in this event, and we was packing it out, and it just went amazing the way it was ran with the Rollering staff. So they're putting their efforts in because it's their event, really. It's their event. I was booking the right DJs, and it was just clockwork. It was brilliant. But then I have now got to a point with the Empire where we have planned for this one to be our last event in September. And that isn't to do with the venue. They want it to carry on. It's to do with me and my beliefs in the soul scene, that I'm enjoying playing the smaller clubs where I can play a niche type of music and delve. Although I love the classics and they play a part on the scene, I much enjoy and get a better buzz now out of doing smaller clubs like Dark Horses.
Yeah.
And this is where I'm a firm believer that, yeah, there is an exposed Northern Soul scene, but there is also a big underground movement. And people who argue that there isn't an underground movement of the soul scene,
Yeah.
well, they don't know about the underground movement, because there is.
Because there is. Yeah.
There is the funk scene, you know, the Burnley Kestrel Suite, for instance. People like Sean Hayden, they're the guys that are, you know, are pushing this scene forward. And yeah, they don't overexpose their events, and you have to get to know these people. And this leads me into now my new promotion, which is the Bury Town Hall, which I'm co-promoting with. I've gone in with Barry Malidi, a guy called Simon Ingram, who are real well-known, well-respected guys on not just the 60s Northern Soul, rare soul scene. Barry Malidi is such a well-respected guy on the 70s and 80s modern soul thing. And they, together as a collective, with me, Barry, Simon, Charlotte, we're reaching out to the young scene. We've reached out to Barry's scene with the 70s and 80s. You know, we're all putting our bit in together and work as a collective team. And we did 2 events before lockdown. Yeah. And they were so special. The music was so special. And we seen a gap in the market where the Northwest, you go down south, go to the Midlands, you've got the 100 Club of the South. Yeah. You've got the Midlands, Dark Horses, Rugby All-Nighter, blah, blah, blah. But up north, you used to have the places like Lifeline and Stoke. There's a bit of a gap now, really. Yeah. And that's what we said. We want to bring something to the north now. Our dream, we would love to create a 100 Club of the North, really. Wow. Okay. And I know that is a big thing to say. That is a real big thing to say. But our first 2 events were just mind-blowing. They were really good, well supported. And people probably watching this now and saying, well, come on, Jordan, you know what I mean? You've just said how, you know, you've been brought up on classics. Yeah, you played forgotten stuff. But people, if you're going to create a club like this in the north that is you know, going to be progressive and going to play some stuff that's different, how are you going to bring that to the table as a DJ? Well, that leads me into my next record now.
Well, I didn't have to do a word. You're the perfect guest.
Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I'm really excited about this because it gives me an opportunity to, because I get branded a lot as you know, a classics, oldies DJ, and it kind of gives me my opportunity to. So this is my next record, and a bit of an unknown one. It's called The Tribulations, and I'm packing up my bags.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Well, it seems like nobody seems to know it, and if anybody YouTube's the record after this after they've watched this, they'll see a guy called Dave Foden has uploaded it to YouTube. Now, this is Dave Foden's copy. So I've been told that this used to get plays at Burnley, but I don't know. I've not pinpointed who it was who was playing it. But the Tribulations, they was founded by a guy called Shelley Garrett. Shelley Garrett and a guy called James House, and it was arranged by an amazing arranger called Floyd Martin. And Dave Foden approached me when I was DJing, planned to DJ at the 100 Club, which was a big thing to me, and I wanted something to bring to the 100 Club. He said, well, Jordan, he says, I've got a record here. He says, I've never heard anyone play it. He created a thread on Soul Source to ask about it as well. Seems a bit of an unknown. Do you want to buy it for the same price that I paid for it? He played it me, and oh wow! If you listen to it after this, the sound clip up, but this purposely, it's a rubbish sound clip. It's quite that's on purpose, and it is an amazing track. And the other side is as well, and the track is wrote about. Floyd Martin and Shelley Garrett, they was going to fight in the Vietnam War. So they wrote this record, Packing Up My Bags, and the B-side, I'm Gonna Build Me a Man, is all about them going to fight in Vietnam. And basically, they put 2 records out on this label. But then Shelley Garrett then he started off as a disc jockey, a DJ, and that's what inspired him to write music. He wrote this record. He wrote a record by Jimmy Connor called "Let's Get Married," and he wrote the popular Wigan Casino spin, "The Tribulations, You Gave Me Up for Promises" on Imperial. And that's all they did, because Shelley Garrett then went into writing plays, and he wrote the Beauty Shop play, which is a massive, massive, famous play in America.
Right.
And it's been made into a film now as
Right.
well.
Okay.
And over the last couple of weeks, I've managed to track down Shelley Garrett's wife. I've managed to track down Floyd, and I've managed to track down James. Unfortunately, Shelley has now passed away. And working with MD Records, we're currently in the process of getting this record into a repress stage for the Northern soul scene, because I'm not saying that this is the only copy, because as soon as this goes out, I've asked around, but I know it's a rare record. They told me that they had a very limited press of this record. They all went to radio stations. One was in LA, and basically nobody's talked to him about this record, because Shelley went on to do big things, films. He made his millions doing that, basically. And I've connected with them over the last few weeks, and they are blown away by that. Somebody 23 years old, and I've told them, so soon this record, this has been, I've been playing this out for the last 2-3 years now, maybe. I played at the 100 Club, and it's been a massive Bury all-nighter spin. So it's an amazing record that, in my head, and other people might say differently, but it's I think I'd say semi-known. I'm not going to say an unknown, but great record.
But I'm going to pick you up on that, because one of the things that features in this show regularly is the 100 Club. And I always ask everybody about the 100 Club. So what was it like to play at the 100 Club? How did that come about?
I'm going to say this. I've never asked for a DJ spot, ever.
Yeah.
In all my time DJ, I don't believe in asking for DJ spots. I believe that there is collectors, like we said earlier, that have devoted their lives to this scene, who are much more deserving than I am, and who have got better to offer to places like the 100 Club than I am. And whenever I get asked to do a DJ spot, I am so happy just to have. And people say, "What time do you want to go on?" And I say, "Anytime," because I'm just so happy. I'll do the first hour. I'll do the last hour. I'll do whatever time, because I'm so happy as a young guy on the scene just to be accepted and just to be able to play records. So with that in mind, when I got asked to do the 100 Club, I never in my life expected to do a venue like that. And Butch was sat on the stage. He was following me, and it was. I'm never really nervous about DJing. But I was like that. I was literally shaking in my boots, and all my mates came. There was anybody who was there for that spot where I did at the 100 Club. There was a notice how many young people was there. Everybody came and supported me, and we all made this big trip down, and it was just one of the most amazing nights of. And this leads me on to my next record.
We can do that, Jordan. I'm just going to sit and listen to you, because I was going to ask you what you played as well as the Tribulations.
I thought, well, you've probably seen the tapes behind me, these tapes here. I do a lot of the classic events. I do a lot of the Gold Soul events. And I believe that without paying thousands of pounds for one-off acetate records and things, over the last few years, I think a way for me to progress, because I do love the oldies, I do love the classic sounds, but I thought, well, how can I be a bit different? Still appeal to the oldies crowd. And I thought, well, I can play, maybe, if I reach out to people who have got tapes, master tapes, if I research properly, with the help of MD Records, Mark and Des, I get test pressings in advance for them. I can start trying to find alternative cuts of things. Start maybe, instead of putting all my energy into buying records that are thousands upon thousands for a classic, say Lou Pride or Eddie Parker or something, I can maybe put that money into looking for tapes and trying to retrieve audio and playing that audio out to a dance floor. And I was thinking, yeah, that makes sense. So I thought, and people said, well, how are you going to do it? Because all these people are dead. You know, how are you going to, people aren't just going to hand over unreleased material.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, yeah, you're right. You know, people know about the soul scene, producers, writers, they know how important it is, the stuff they've got. But I thought, well, okay, well, let's reach out to people who went to places like Detroit, like Gilly, Richard Gilbert, who discovered Little Ann, and brought her over to Cleethorpes. Let's reach out to people like Gilly, Rob Thomas, and let's just, I'm just going to be blunt with them and just say, you know, I love this music. I'd love to now get something that's a little bit of my own, that, you know, it's a bit exclusive.
Yeah.
And with the help of Mick H has been great. He introduced me to Rob Thomas at his Irish club all nighter. And Rob, anybody who knows Rob, and he'll say it himself, so Mick H says, you know what's rarer than that record that Rob Thomas has just give you, Jordan? He says, seeing him smile, because we get on really well, me and Rob, and, you know, Charlotte, my girlfriend's had him in with bloody dress up party hats and everything, and everyone's like, wow, you know, because he's a character.
Yeah.
And the first night I met Rob at the Irish club, I was in the record bar, and he says, are you Jordan Wilson? Like this. I said, yeah. He says, I'm not going to swear because we spoke about that, but he says, if you know what is good for you, he says, come to my car. So I was like, what? He says, I'm Rob Thomas, and Mick H has told me that you want some help with some stuff. So I said, okay, cool. So I went to Rob's car and I sat in, and the first track he played me was an alternative take of the Neurons, All of My Life.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, wow. And then he starts going through all these tracks. And now I've been helped out by Rob Thomas for example, he came to one of our Empire all-nighters and he brought me an audio disc acetate that was found by Dave Raystrick in Detroit. And Rob has now sold the majority of his collection, but he had still a few special discs. He said to me, he introduced me to his friends, this Gaz Simpson. Gaz is a good guy and he's got a great collection. He talks about what he's got. He says, why don't you give Gaz a go in the back room? He says, and as a thank you, he says, I'll give you this audio disc acetate. I said, what is it? And I looked at it. It was a Lester Tipton, This Won't Change audio disc acetate. He says, now, Joe, he says, the reason I'm giving you this disc, he says, don't get me wrong. He says, it's badly worn. I couldn't play it out because it hisses and everything.
Yeah.
But for me, I collect all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's an alternative take as well.
Yeah.
It's a different mix on this. And you give me a sound file of it as well. I've never played this mix out because, you know, I don't believe in getting a dub cut of a track that's very similar to a release. It came out on the beat and it's too similar for me to play out. But he gave me this audio disc acetate and I've got it. And it was like, wow, you know what I mean? And he's just provided me, we speak regular and he's provided me with, I've got a couple of tracks. One of the tracks is called Esther Grant, Take My Heart. Now, there's not just me playing this unissued track. It came from Aidy Crowsdale discovered the master tapes. Rob got access to the master tapes as well. And I've been playing it out for a few years. And then Aidy played it. Cause it's Aidy's tape, really.
Yeah.
Aidy started playing it at the 100 Club. And Aidy gave me permission to play it. And Arthur Fenn, Arthur Fenn is playing it out. And we're all playing it under the Esther Grant's cover-up. So that is to me, just to be given something and, you know, to be trusted, you know, because, you know, that is a track that, you know, as a young guy, you know, it's risky to give tracks like that out, you know, because if that could get into, you know, some other people's hands and then it could get licensed and repressed and, you know what I mean? And, so I've been playing that and that came from Rob. But another guy is Richard Gilbert, Gilly, one of the nicest, most humble guys I've ever met. Now, this is so special to me. and I'll show it you.
Yes, please do. Please do.
This is because this never came out on a record. This track,
right?
And this is the 10-inch multi-track studio master. It's the
wow.
An unissued record, and it's you can see it on there. It's called. It just says "Wake Up" on there, and you better wake up. There's also some other tracks on there. You're Still in My Heart, JJ Barnes, and You're So Good by Steve Mancha, and obviously this is multi-track. You can see the width of the tape, so there's multiple tracks on that. So when you play this tape, you can get you can isolate things. So there's instrumentals, acapellas, you know. But I originally heard a different version of this track, this "You Better Wake Up" track, and it was on a cassette tape that Gilly recorded. I think it was Ed Wolfram and Don Davis's studios. I think it was Golden World when he went over to Detroit in the 90s, and he had this track on there, "You Better Wake Up," and it was a single female vocalist singing on this track, and it was incredible. He said he'd never done anything with it since the 90s. He said he used to play it out at Bretby and things, but Gilly doesn't DJ. He says, "Why don't you get that cut?" He said, "It's never come out on anything." He said, "And play it out." And I just fell in love with this track. It is incredible, and I've never got bored of it. It's very simple. This other take is very simple. It's not finished. Yeah. And then I've been playing that, and I covered it up as Little Miss Dee Dee under a name, Don Davis Connection. Dee Dee. Yeah. We have now found out who the real artist of that version is, but I'm not saying who it is. And recently, then over the last few weeks, I'd say probably about a month ago now, there was an auction of Don Davis's master tapes. I'm scrolling through, seeing if there's anything of interest. And then it says, "The Debonaires, You Better Wake Up." So I thought, "You better wake up." I said, no, this can't be the same. So I've scrolled down. There's a little 30-second sound clip. I hit play on it. I thought, wow. It's the same record, but a totally finished version. Yeah. With sax, with tambourine. Yeah. Now, I did further investigation into "You Better Wake Up," this more complete version. I found out it came out on a CD that some Gold Soul Connection did. But this version that I've got now on tapes, I've had people say, "Jordan, you've just spent," I spent £700. I'm not going to lie, on buying this tape because it means so much to me. Yeah. And there's other tracks on it as well. He said, "But you just spent that." He says, "But I'm sure that came out, this full version, on a CD. So, you know, why have you done that?" And I said, "This isn't the same take. And I've not played this out anywhere yet." Wow. I've connected with the Debonaires. It's Elsie Baker and the Debonaires. Elsie Baker on lead vocals. And whereas it did come out on a CD, but that is unfinished. It's like the other single female vocal version. It's unfinished. This is full of banging tambourines. It's full of trumpets. It's got all this studio talk. It's got a 1, 2, 3 counting and everything on it. So, and I told Gilly, and it just starts off that story from Gilly taping that on a cassette to Ed Wolfram's in Detroit. Then him having that, then I digitalized all these tapes for him. There's not just that track I got probably 100 unissued Detroit tracks off Gilly. Yeah. For my trusted with them for my DJ spots. And and it just, I cannot expect the buzz when I'd seen that tape. Yeah. And I said, "Gilly, I've got to have it. I've got to pay whatever it is." Yeah. And I'm just so happy just to now, just the history behind that tape, and you know, and how it's just sat in Golden World. And so I've not played this version out yet, but once lockdown's over with, that's going to get a real hammering. So so that's my 3 tracks.
Jordan, I had Greg Belson on the show a few weeks ago, and we were talking about vinyl archaeology and about, this is another example of this, because you're not just buying something, you're taking the time to reach out to people and say, "Hey, listen, I've just come across this. You're connecting dots. This is such an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing it. It's just now, and I will say at this stage, whenever D8 is up and running again, you must come over and play some of this stuff for us, because it's
And this, Joe, these tapes behind me are all just other stuff that like, for example, that one is actually, I didn't get, that's a Fame studio tape, Arthur Connolly. This is another great tape. This is the Martha Reeves version of Hit and Run. But although that has come out on CD, what came from this tape, but there's also 3 other tracks that have never been released on that. So I've just got this, which is there's a great track on there that I'm really looking forward to playing at Bury. So I think this, like, going just back to what we said before about trying to be progressive, this is kind of my approach to trying to, there's these tracks like that. Martha Reeves, Hit and Run, it was obviously originally done by Rose Batiste.
Yeah.
Martha Reeves has come out on CD, but then there's other tracks on there that have never come out on CD or anything. And they're very similar to Rose Batiste, Martha Reeves, Hit and Run, that Groovesville, Detroit, Golden World sounds, which is very fitting for the Northern Soul scene.
Yeah.
But you're playing something different. So, it's kind of my way of trying to be different. So.
Listen, that's amazing. I want to move on because I want to ask you one more thing, then I promise I'll let you go and have your weekend. We're talking about lockdown, and the story you've been telling is of communities. And one of the things I know you've been pushing on through with is, I know you're heavily involved in archival work, which I want to hear a bit about, but I also want to hear about Tuesday Night Soul, because this is your latest project, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. So basically, just like everybody's doing at the minute, streaming live records onto Facebook. At first, I got, people enjoy it. Some people don't enjoy it. I got some real stick at first for doing it.
Yeah.
But even before lockdown happened, I always wanted. I've been asking Richard Serling for advice. Richard's had me on BBC before, and I've always wanted to get into radio.
Yeah.
But I've never had the time, basically, to try and do it. And I thought, well, you know what? Everyone's streaming live onto Facebook. I've got the equipment to do it. I'm going to start up just a regular little live stream on Facebook. And it just started nothing serious, just me talking, pretending I know what I'm going on about and playing some records. And I got messaged by a guy called Mike Greg Thomas, who he runs the Northern Soul official Facebook group on Facebook, which has got like 157,000 members on it.
Golly gosh.
So he said, wow, he said, I've loved this show that you've done. I said, well, it's nothing serious, like just messing around. He says, why don't we make it a regular thing, and I'll give you admin rights. We'll stream onto the Northern Soul page direct. I said, yeah, great, cool. And then I've known Mike for years, really, but he's lived out in California. He has, he's really, really knowledgeable on things. He has a record pressing plant he works for, and he put out a few years back the different version of "You Don't Love Me," Epitome of Sound, and he worked with Gloria Jones to help fund the Mark Bolan School of Music. So all the music from the release they did of. I think it was Tainted Love. All the money went back. So he's a real good guy. And I shared with them this vision of starting a regular radio show and also this project, which is this is going to be the first time I've talked about it on this.
Thank you very much, Jordan.
I talked to Mike about it before I knew this was coming up, and I thought it was a great opportunity to tell you about it. So what we're going to do is we've now locked in the name. We're going to register as a non-profit charity organisation. And I spoke to people like Steve Phillis, a guy, Paul Lightley, and Richard Serling, and some of the well-known guys been around a long time. And they've said to me how a soul archive has never been done with something that's done properly for the soul scene. So if you've ever heard of the British Youth Archive, They do all different subcultures around the UK, and it's all about social history.
Yeah.
And they go around to different towns and cities. They set up scanning events, and they scan in people's photographs of the different scenes that they've been into. They created a database of really cool imagery, and then they go around and do exhibitions of unseen imagery.
Yeah.
So me and Charlotte have wanted to do this for a long time, and with lockdown, it's had a bit of a silver lining. I met Mike through him sharing the Tuesday Night Soul, and so we said, well, why don't we do something called the Soul Archive, which is going to reach out to people on the Northern Soul scene, because the amount of people I speak to at night, as you've said, I've got all these imagery, I've got live cassette tape recordings of various venues, memorabilia. He says, but my kids are not into music, the soul music. They don't know they see a bit of paper with a note on it. They don't have no connection with that, and they'll throw that out. But to me, that is social history of the scene.
Absolutely.
What that note is, referring to, going back to the times when people didn't have the internet. You relied on telephones, boxes. People relied on letters, imagery, live cassette recordings, memorabilia. So starting a non-profit, no profit in this. We don't want to gain from this. This is purely the love of the music to create something which is going to archive all these things for a future, generation to look back on. Because you've got to think, the Northern Soul and Rare Soul scene is one of the longest running subcultures. You compare it to things like the Hacienda or Britpop and Oasis and the Verve. Oasis have had, so much, so many great exhibitions of things that have really been well put together by people who are passionate about that sort of thing. But when you look at the soul scene, it's never had nothing. And I know people will be worried about this project when I talk about it, saying that this is going to overexpose the soul scene in the wrong way. But I need to express to you all really that this is going to be run by people who are well connected to the soul scene, who know the history, even the dark parts of the history. It's not going to be all, put in, we went to Wigan Casino and spread talc all over the floor and we had a great time. And we're going to talk about the dangerousness of the scene. We're going to talk about, the risks people took to get to these venues and how much of a devotion, like myself, that the people have devoted their lives over the years. And I think an exhibition, a chance to go around and, interview Gilly. Gilly is bringing out a book, but to maybe go around kind of what you're doing with DJs, do a 15-20 minute interview with about their life and how, and I know people are humble on the scene, but they should be well respected because they, like Gilly discovered Little Ann. He sat in the basement and listened to What Should I Do, and uncovered Richard Serlin's cover up and said, that is not, oh God, what is it? The Sister, he had it covered up, something in the Sister 3 at Wigan for years and years. Gilly came back and said, that's Little Ann Bridgeforth. And, that is amazing. And they met Little Ann and, took her out for dinner, brought her over to Cleethorpes. Let's document this and kind of create something.
Listen, Jordan, that sounds stunningly amazing. Because, the thing I love about all of this is the ephemera, the hand-designed posters, the notes that people, or names that are written on record labels and stuff like that. I love that. I find that magical. And so to hear you describe this, because also when you were talking, I was imagining you could have live events where you would just have 2 or 3 people, someone like yourself, chairing it, just asking them to pretty much doing what we're doing, but live, surrounded by these images, and then it could segue into a nighter afterwards or something.
Exactly. And I just want to really express, because I'm really protective of the soul scene myself. I hate overexposure of it when it's portrayed in the wrong way, when it doesn't. A majority of the time, I don't say that I'm into the Northern Soul scene.
Yeah.
I have a phobia of, I know I've cut my own hair, but I have a phobia of going to the hairdresser, to be honest, because I sit in that chair and they say, what are you doing at the weekends? And I'm saying, I do not want to say Northern Soul, because they say, oh, such a body, and they fabricate these, you know what I mean? And I'm into the rare soul scene, and I want to create this soul archive project based around them ethos of a coming together of the right people. And for example, I've started connecting with people now to start this project on the go. And we've just got a live cassette tape recorded at Wigan. Actually, I don't know if I can mention this. It's about the naughty side of the soul scene, really, about at Wigan. Can I mention that? Yeah.
We can have that another time, because I don't want you to give. I want you to come back on the show, because this is stunningly interesting. But if you tell me everything now.
yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. So basically, we've reached out to these people. We've got some amazing imagery that has never been seen before.
Yeah.
And once lockdown is over, we're creating a map and we're pinpointing so many people in a different area. That weekend, we'll do like 5 people in one area.
Yeah.
And we're going to scan, and people are so up for submitting things into this archive. And like I say, non-profit. We've spoke about it with Mike. If we do make profit from this, we're going to look into, MD Records are currently working with a blues museum over in America, where they have artists who really have no money at all, and they just love jamming. And if we do make money, like Mike, who I'm working on this project with, he give all the profits to the Mark Bolan School of Music. We'd like to do something similar with that, to give something back.
Absolutely amazing. And what excites me about this is it's keeping history alive. And history as a concept for a lot of people doesn't really capture sort of a lot of contemporary imaginations, but it's something that I can really see the value of. And it is something which becomes organic and keeps growing. You meet the next person, they give you the next thing, they say, oh, you must speak to so-and-so, this kind of stuff. Jordan, that's absolutely amazing. It's been a real thrill listening to you.
And you don't know where, this is going to go, because although we're doing the soul scene in the UK, but imagine doing a kind of timeline exhibition of kind of starting with the, even going back to, the 1930s, 1940s, because it all plays a part, and, and doing a walk through timeline, which then goes into the British soul scene. Until present day. So
there's a whole, I mean, this would be for a separate conversation, but there's a whole section on this about the relationship between Ireland and the British soul scene as well. Lots of people I talk to have been going to the 100 Club, Cleethorpes, since the 90s, and kind of there's a real cultural exchange. Jordan, I'm going to ask a final question, because it's just been amazing. You have I think it's been really interesting listening to you, because you do have a real humility. You're respectful, you're knowledgeable. If I want to hear stuff, where can I find your stuff? Are you on Mixcloud, for example? Can I find bits and pieces?
You know what? I've got so much going on at the minute with everything. And there's still stuff that I haven't talked about, like working with MD Records. I've just secured like a little role doing with MD Records, doing a label with them.
Talk to me about that then.
Oh, right, okay. Mark and Des Parker. I met Des and the Lesser Odd Fellows all day, which I was DJing at. And my mates went absolutely mad at me, because there was a 2-roomed event and I was downstairs, and I spent a whole duration of being at that event. I was downstairs with Des, and we just connected like that, and we realized that we both had, we were both passionate about music. And then Des approached Mark, Mark and Des. He said how he'd like to get me on board with promotion. So, for example, they don't do test pressings, because they don't need to do test pressings, because all of the records sell out instantly. They're not greedy. The records are priced at £10 each. They're not, they're not for money. All of the money they get funds the next project. But they said how they wanted to, like Gilly, like Rob, help me with unreleased material. And they started providing me test pressings of tracks that they were going to put out months in advance for me to play in DJ spots. And now we've just formed an amazing relationship where they've asked me now to start working with, and they're starting out another subsidiary label called the Black MD label, which we're hopefully going to, as we talked before about the Tribulations track, we're going to put some tracks out on that which have never been reissued before. And although I'm kind of, saying how, about tracks being reissued and stuff, and I went on about bootlegs earlier, these are not going to be bootlegs. These are going to be reissued. And I've spoke to the Tribulations, and I spoke to like Floyd and Shelley Garrett's wife. And although I could keep this record to myself, it's a hard record, and I always wanted to do that with this record. But when I spoke to Floyd, and he was the smile on his face when he knew that people in the UK was digging his music.
Yeah.
And people have asked, my friends who aren't relatively collected, who love this track, have said, well, I'd love to buy a licensed copy of this track.
Yeah.
That all rights are paid. And I'm thinking, well, I could either be, a really selfish person and keep this track to myself, or I could give so much joy to these writers, these artists over in America, and say, would you like to, all license paid, all royalties paid, would you like to put this track out for a second? And they've said yes. And Mark and Des have seen this connection with they've asked me, they've basically, they were said that, I just love connecting and researching artists. And we've also just, there's other things going on. We've just found another 200 tapes from a record pressing plant that shut down. I've been connected with a guy over the last couple of years, and he's finally things are progressing from it. So Mark and Des said, well, this is amazing, basically, if you want to come on board and work with us. So I've took the opportunity and just said, so who knows? But that's just something else. There's just so much going on at the minute, and it's purely just because I just love this scene. I love the music, and sometimes I can be described as a bit of a recluse. I'm, like I said at the start of this conversation, I was always an eccentric kid, and it's because I'm in my own bubble doing this thing with soul music. I really just want to, I don't know. I want to do something that's good for the scene, and just to prove to them people who've said to me in the past, Jordan, there's nothing left out there to find, or there's no records in America. Don't go to America. There's no records there. Yes, there is. Do you know what I mean? There's labels like Ace Kent, labels like MD, Digging Deep. They're finding great stuff. Cannonball. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's if you're prepared to get out there and look.
Yeah, the Cannonball record was dropped the other day, wasn't it? I mean, that's going to be,
The Daryl Banks thing they've just put out is incredible. So, hats off to them guys, and and with MD as well. That's something that they're not going to pigeonhole themselves. They're branching out just into all different genres of music as well. Yeah. So they're not just saying we want hardcore northern thumpers. Yeah. Their brand message is they just want to put out good music. So so I'm really looking forward to the adventure with them guys.
It sounds amazing. Jordan, I'm going to have you back on the show for what I'm going to call part 2. When you're talking, they should be making a film of this. So this would be a great Netflix series about hunting down people, turning up and saying, listen, here's that record from 1971. You forgot all about it because it's the only thing you ever did. Now there's this. It would be absolutely amazing. Yeah. For the moment, Jordan, I'm just going to say, listen, I have been really inspired by your passion for this, because I just think the only thing that keeps us going as humans is to be passionate about something. And it's stunning to hear the depth of your passion. It's been really interesting listening to you. If anybody has any comments or thoughts on anything that Jordan has been talking about, then please leave them below. If you would like to subscribe to the channel, it means we can get Jordan to come back again. But for the moment, Jordan Wilson, thanks ever so much for joining me in the record room.
thank you so much for allowing me to have this opportunity, because like I said earlier, you know, I keep myself to myself. It's great just to have the opportunity to tell, you know, what I've got going on in my story. So thank you all for listening as well.